Welcome everybody to today's session. Thank you so much for joining. In today's webinar, we are going to be talking about e-commerce SEO at scale, talking about strategies for complex multinational websites. To start off, a quick round of introductions. Myself, I'm Mimi Bontari. I'm a senior customer success manager here at Lumar. I've been with the company for over 5 years now, and I've worked with lots of different companies over the years, all with their own sort of challenges in terms of managing e-commerce websites. I'm really excited for today's discussion. It's with one of it's with an agency that I've had the pleasure of working with. I'll hand over to our presenters to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thanks, Mimi. Hi, everyone. This is Zeke Azmi. I'm SEO Performance Director at Brave Bison. I've been in this industry for over 7 years now, supporting clients that range from medium-sized businesses to some of the UK's largest and most complex websites. My focus has always been on solving technical SEO challenges at scale, and excited to be here and share with you some learnings from my journey and some strategy as well.
Cool. I'm Sim. So hi everyone. I'm a senior SEO consultant at Brave Bison. I bring a blend of in-house and agency experience. So I've experienced SEO from both sides of the coin. And I've worked on national, regional, global websites. So I have really good experience within SEO strategies for different types of websites. More recently, I've been focused on working on regional websites that are multi-market, essentially helping brands to scale their organic presence across regions, which is the key topic that we'll be walking through today.
Amazing.
Lovely, thank you so much. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, first we're going to go over some few housekeeping items, and then we're going to dive into the main part of the webinar. Starting off with setting the scene with why e-commerce SEO at scale is difficult. Then we're going to cover some of the main challenges when dealing with large e-commerce sites and the solutions for those challenges. And then in the third part, we're going to be focusing on processes and workflows. And then in the end, we'll aim to leave some time for some questions from the audience. So feel free to pop in those questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you can click forward, Z, yeah. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's a Q&A box at the bottom in the toolbar in Zoom. Then in terms of feedback, at the end of the session, there will be a feedback form. It takes less than a minute. Literally, it's the shortest feedback form ever. But please fill that in. It's really helpful for us to make sure that these sessions are as useful and interesting as possible. And then this webinar will be shared so you can watch it on demand. In a few days' time, it will be available on our YouTube channel, and you will also receive an email, and you will see our blog post. It will be transcribed as well. Closed captions. You can enable subtitles, closed captions. You can use, there's an icon at the bottom of the screen. If you can't see that, you can click on the more icon, and then you'll be able to choose show subtitle. You can also enable live transcripts. And then in terms of the webinar recording, it will include subtitles. Anyway, it will be distributed in a few days, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so we like to start these webinars with a question to our lovely audience to see, like, just to see what everyone thinks before we dive into the main topics. So today's question is, what is the biggest challenge you have when managing complex multinational e-commerce websites? You should get a pop-up on your screen right now, so feel free to select the answer that describes your experience the best. We're curious to see if this matches what the team will be talking about later on, or if there's anything else that you have experienced. I don't know if you had to guess, same or Z, like what you, if you already have something that you think may be the winner. I'm just curious to see.
I think complex site structure is probably a key one that I've witnessed over the years, and taxonomy has been quite important within that. I've worked on multiple taxonomy projects, so I'm thinking maybe that one might be the top or edging towards the top.
Yeah, I'd say the structure of the setup of the domains, subfolders, etc. That's definitely always something that comes up quite frequently.
Yeah, that's something that I've also seen with brands, but let's see what the results will be. Okay, so this is actually not the first one. The first number one is content localization. Next up, we've got page volume and over indexation / crawlability. Then complex site structure. So that's an interesting result, and I know we'll be diving into content localization later on. So
yeah,
it was good to see like what people think. Yeah, out of stock inventory management, and then yeah, I don't know if anyone else has put anything in the chat, but there's also like a small percentage of something different. But yeah, these are interesting results.
Really interesting. Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, the page volume over indexation, crawl bloat being the second is, I think it's a bit expected. So that's always the most complex aspect of technical SEO, particularly for large scale websites. But content localization, I think that international aspect is another one that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, this brings us to the beginning of the kind of main section of this webinar, starting off with why e-commerce SEO at scale is difficult. So yeah, over to you, same to.
Nice. So I'm going to kick off with the first section of the webinar, which is about why e-commerce SEO at scale can be difficult. So to help set the scene, there are common characteristics of large retail websites that are very common, regardless of what industry you may work in. For example, structure and taxonomy, volume of pages, over-indexation that we've kind of covered in the poll, the multilingual aspect, the tech debt, these are all things that are very common across large retail websites. What we've done is we've outlined on the left-hand side the kind of ideal scenario of what we'd all want our websites to do, or websites that we work on that we would like them to do. And then on the right-hand side, we've been able to outline what we actually face on multinational websites. There are so many underlying components that are imperfect behind the scenes, and that is so expected. And what our job really is to do is to figure out what those complexities are, how big they are, break them down, and prioritize. And then that's where we can really push our resource, our effort, in order to build a plan of action, and that will help impact performance. So it's very common that you're going to find things that are imperfect, and these are the list of things that you'll probably find. Some of the key things that we're going to speak about today is definitely the multilingual aspect. And then if you go into the next slide, see, also another one that I've pointed out that we are definitely going to cover today is the product availability as well. So we're talking about out of stock solutions and rules and what you should do in those situations. So yeah, if we go to the next slide. So what we've been able to share here is just kind of, you can come back and look at this to see how what you're looking for or what you think should be happening, and then what that actually means in real life. So high quality localized content and visuals. Sometimes when you're working on really large sites, that can be neglected. There can be duplicate assets across multiple markets that aren't localized. which makes it really difficult, especially if your CMS backend doesn't support that. And then also within here, we've got a correctly functioning internal search tool that contributes to index bloat, and then seamless shopping and checkout experience. So fragmented user journey due to technical and UX issues. So I think one of the key things to take away that we're going to share in the presentation is that how SEO and UX also are more of a blended proposition now, and how they kind of work hand in hand. And they're not just like these two siloed teams. So if you, from this section, what I would really take away is if you could get in touch with your UX teams by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to share why it's so important to build a rapport with some of those teams.
Cool, amazing. So, so yeah, now we have discussed that. What are some of the characteristics of large-scale e-commerce retail websites? I'd like to highlight some of the key goals, high-level goals of the campaigns of this scale. Contrary to popular belief, I would say SEO visibility is not the only thing that you care about when you're dealing with a large, complex website. You equally care about workflow efficiencies and scalability of your efforts. And that's for obvious reasons, because you do want to use your resource efficiently. You do want to improve collaboration and processes with teams across disciplines. You want to replicate your successes and minimize your failures. You do want the quality and maturity of your whole website, of your whole ecosystem or the network of websites within the brand that you're working on to be consistent so that they can benefit from each other. And instead of being a limiting factor for each other, if that makes sense. And that's kind of that whole ecosystem of consistent optimization can only be achieved when you are not focused solely on visibility, but you're actually considering and giving your effort and focus to efficiencies and scalability. If you do not do that, there are risks. The first risk is that you risk your commercial performance due to visibility loss, which ultimately leads to traffic loss, which is commercial loss at the end. And that happens when your critical pages are not being crawled, are not being indexed, are not being surfaced, when there are incorrect regional content is being served to users and they're not converting, and when there is an increased reliance on paid channels to fill the gaps that SEO is leaving. The second risk you run into is that your processes slow down as you have to manually gather and stitch data. Development teams stop listening when your recommendations are not backed by enough evidence, and you also end up having inconsistent optimization levels across markets or across different parts of the website, which start where strategic misalignment begin to appear, and your whole campaign starts being inefficient to some level.
Awesome. Yeah, this was really interesting. I think it really sets the scene for what we're going to talk about in this next section as well. And I know a lot of people are kind of waiting to hear all about the solutions to the challenges, some of the ones that we saw in the question earlier. So yeah, we can move on to the next section. Yeah.
Cool. So the big issue at hand, really, when it comes to e-com sites that are multi-market brands that operate across numerous markets and languages, is that we need to adapt and align to multiple audiences. And what we found, especially from the client that I work with, which is a global footwear brand, is that it's not necessarily always the SEO optimization part that is difficult. The challenging part really comes from having more than one market, more than one region, where you will have nuances within each market, a different set of popular products in each market, different search behavior and different buying behavior and trend behavior. So within this, what we really need to ensure is that content, structure and technical SEO are localized. So if you go into the next slide, the first challenge that we spoke about previously was site structure. So the first challenge really is about domain and domain type. And the domain type that you have is really dependent on the business that you are working for, or if it's your own business. So there's not really like a one size fits all that would say that you must do this setup and this is going to be the best one for you. However, the one that I have the most experience with and that really work that we've got within our own setup for our global footwear brand is the multi-domain setup, where we are using CTTLD. So this is a country code top level domain. So for example, what you'll see is we will have your website dot and then the market name, so FR, so that's the code of the market. And then we have that for 11 markets within the EMEA region, and then we have that for 2 markets within the North America region. So when you're working with so many markets, this setup is definitely the best way to go. And what it allows us to do is to really put SEO efforts in a more localized, controlled way. And then if you go into the next slide, I'll be able to share some of the benefits of this setup. So within this, we found that the CCTLD setup has allowed us to focus on hreflang. And it's allowed us to have, like I mentioned before, localized control, making optimizations at local level. However, I do have to say this does require resource. So even though it is a more it's more of like a targeted approach, and you're not always using like a template market, it does mean that within my team, I do have dedicated market leads who own their markets, who are able to make localized optimizations. They're able to use data sources and analyze market nuances and build insights, and it allows us to act locally. So this domain setup is probably the best if you're working on many markets in more than one region.
Cool. Then from another kind of a major challenge that we always have with large websites, bigger websites, is the page volume and the issues around over-indexation and crawlability. It's a fact, it's a reality that large-scale e-commerce websites are really complex technical platforms, and they are usually the ones with the highest amount of over-indexation and crawl bloat issues. Just to align on what these two concepts means is that over-indexation is when Google or other search engines index pages from your website that have no SEO value. They can be great pages for user experience. From a user experience perspective, they might have a usability, a purpose, but from an SEO perspective, these pages are low value pages. And crawl bloat is when search engines end up crawling a lot of URLs that have low to no SEO value for them. So, so the driver behind both these issues for these large e-commerce websites is complexity. An e-commerce platform can easily have 100 times bigger number of pages running on its website than its actual indexable set of pages that you want Google to index and serve to users surface on the on the search engine results page, and this is excluding the hundreds of millions of assets, images, JavaScript, CSS styling files that are all needed for a seamless user experience and functionality. But from an SEO perspective, the pages that you want to surface through search engine experience are literally the tip of the iceberg. And this is analogy, you can think that iceberg is the whole platform running in its actual shape, and what you want to expose to search engines is only the part that is needed for a great organic search performance. And the gap between the actual pages you care about from an SEO perspective and the actual pages that exist is driven by the complexity. And particularly the modern a platform is, the more the better the user experience, the more the functionality is there. You will see there will be more complexities and more unexpected URL combinations appearing for those platforms. Some examples or some reasons why there are always lots of combinations that get indexed or get crawled is the typical filters, faceted navigation, parameters, dynamically generated assets, and all these URLs. The consequence of this gap or this indexation or crawling of all those relatively unnecessary URLs is that for user experience, it's great. It makes the user experience seamless and amazing. But if you do not govern it effectively from an SEO perspective, this leads to over-indexation and crawl bloat, where, as I said, search engines spend a disproportionate amount of time or effort on low-value URLs, and this ultimately leads into the impact that it has on the performance. Then that it limits your visibility growth, because Google is not able to prioritize and focus on the pages that truly matter for SEO performance.
Cool. So I'm going to move on to talking about content localization challenges. So the key thing with content localization is obviously the keyword targeting aspect of it, and then ensuring that you're able to adapt, looking at each market, looking at the keyword strategy, looking at your keyword mapping. And the reason for that is because you want to resonate with the local audiences. And like I mentioned before, there will be different buying and searching habits in each of the markets. And then also another key thing that you want to maintain is obviously your brand consistency. So when we're looking at SEO, we all, of course, also want to take a look at and maintain brand consistency, because that's the core of your business. So what we've done is we've separated some of the sub issues that you'll find when you're looking at content localization. So inconsistent quality. So this usually happens when you're using like a template market, and then you are using that for all of the other markets. So what can happen is that your content quality across those other markets is a lot less than that key market. And that really comes from unclear ownership and approval process. So it's really important to understand who owns what within your team, and if you're an agency side, who is the stakeholder for whichever market on the brand side. Another key issue is missing localized content or copy. So this is usually where English has been used as the default language. And then what you have is a mix of languages on pages for markets, or essentially just translated and not transcreated. So not thinking about what keywords are actually valuable to that market, which leads to poorly localized alternative pages. Siloed locales. So this is where we have disjointed efforts across multiple teams. So whether it's global, regional, local agencies, and that leads to inefficiencies. So usually if you're working regional, it's really good to have or build a rapport with someone from the global side. So you are able to build a strategy that works globally, as well as taking into consideration your regional and market nuances. And then generic optimizations. So what this means is that local pages lack targeting for region-specific search behavior and long-tail queries. So I would say that keyword research still remains the bread and butter when you're looking at content localization and the challenges within that. So definitely being able to conduct keyword research for other markets is a really important skill.
Amazing. Thanks, Sam. So yeah, another challenge and quite a key one is dealing with the inventory fluctuations. We understand that taxonomy of an e-commerce website, and we all agree that taxonomy, the categorization of e-commerce websites, does evolve slowly over time and is usually quite planned. On the other hand, inventory does fluctuate at a pace which is much faster and to an extent unpredictable. There are always products going out of stock or coming to the end of their life cycle, and the issue there is that each scenario needs to be tackled uniquely. There are multiple teams feeding or controlling that process. There is not one central team or a webmaster who goes into the CMS and marks one product as offline. There are multiple teams who are responsible, who own different processes in large scale businesses. And what happens in those cases is that you have product gone out of stock, that's redirected 302 to something. You as SEO team are not aware of that, let's say in the same hour or the same day. So you do need some kind of really, really effective and regular monitoring in place to, first of all, understand what has changed on the website. So, so I would say the kind of the approach that we have taken over the years to deal with these situations effectively is to first of all create a strategy that addresses each scenario of products going offline. As I said, they might have come to end of their life cycle, or it could be actually just a temporary out of stock situation when the product is going to be back in a day or in 7 days or in 14 days. So each scenario should be dealt uniquely. There should always be monitoring in place that surfaces such products regularly. We have experienced with Lumar's custom extraction, that we can very quickly identify such products. So we have crawls in place for all the product pages for our clients where needed. And what it means is that every morning when a crawl runs, from the content of that page, uh, the 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 indication of that product going out of stock is already there on the page because it has the text out of stock, which means we can quickly filter the products that are no longer live on the website, which also means that we can establish processes around always reporting back those URLs to another team who's responsible for, let's say, implementing redirects in the system. And the way we deal with it, as I said, like from an identification perspective, there's always a monitoring in place. And then for the permanently gone products, you would usually redirect them to something relevant, usually to its product page or an alternative product or category. For the temporary out of stock situations, depending on if that's a really short term out of stock situation or a medium or a mid-term one, depending on that, you would then redirect them again to something I'd say uh, relevant if it's a few weeks out of stock situation. And if it is something really hot, selling quickly and in demand, you would not sometime even redirect it to something else, and you just keep that page with a 200 message and just say the product is out of stock, so that as soon as the stock is back, you start selling. So in these situations, I think one common blind spot we've seen is the structured data. It's often overlooked because on the PDPs, when products go out of stock, if the URL is live, it will have the same structured data that was on it when the product was actually selling and it was available to purchase. But when that changes, uh, if structured data is not updated, then there are issues with that. It can be that because Google can still see the URL and the structured data says the product is available. This is the delivery cost. This is the timeline of delivery, and this is the price and everything, which means Google will keep serving it on its results, and that can mean a situation where we are sending mixed signals to Google. And so we always kind of establish processes around making sure that whenever these changes are happening, such products have an updated structured data in place. I'm definitely not advocating for taking individual products and updating their structured data. That should be at scale, programmatically, strategically, so that whatever product falls into that gap, it's always handled accordingly. Another area where we've seen sometimes not a lot of people give focus is the contextualization of actual performance in line with the products going out of stock. So we usually attribute the traffic coming directly to that PDP. You will have a negative impact because that product is no more live. But actually, those products, when they go out of stock, they have a that affects the categories they are part of. So if one category only had 6 products and 2 of them are out of stock, then your content is not as competitive, let's say, in that SERP, in that context, versus your competitors. So you will have a negative impact of that on the PLPs that are holding or serving those pages as well. So I think all in all, 4 things from my side on tackling effectively the inventory fluctuations. First one is that each scenario should be strategically, programmatically in a process-oriented way, should be dealt with uniquely. The second is that there should always be monitoring in place that surfaces such products easily. The third one is that structured data should always be updated. And the fourth one is that performance should be contextualized and not the direct clicks to the PDP should be seen as performance that is attributed to that.
Thank you so much. This was really insightful. Yeah, lots of practical advice there. This leads us to the third part of the webinar, processes and workflows. At this stage, we've got one more question for our audience. So if we move on to the next slide, again, you'll see a pop-up on your screen. Before we kind of dive into the insights, we'd love to hear from you. Which part of your current SEO workflow is the most challenging for you? And again, you've got a few choices to go from. Auditing, crawling the website, prioritizing which issues to tackle first, implementing SEO fixes, technical or content, reporting SEO issues to stakeholders, coordinating across teams to get things done, or something else that's not on this list. Curious to see what people are finding. Again, what would you pick if you could pick just one as the hardest one?
I think for me, it's probably prioritizing which issues to tackle first, because I think data collection, depending on your tool stack, I think getting to data nowadays is quite easy, but it's about what do you do with that data, how you're analyzing that data, and what do you think is going to be the most impactful. So I think prioritization is not only something we question on our side, it's definitely on the client side as well. When we share back information, it's like, where do we start? What's the most important thing? So I'm going to go with prioritization.
Yeah, I think coordinating across teams can be a tricky one as well, I think, because it changes quite dramatically from team to team, and it can have really unique challenges depending on the setup, the structure that you're working in, and the people you work with. So for me, it's likely coordination across teams.
Yeah, I think so. I think as well, because we're obviously in our industry, we forget that it's not top priority for other teams and channels that you work with. So yeah, I definitely have felt the effects of that one, of coordinating across other teams as well. Always trying to get the buy-in.
Great.
See what people answered. Yeah, coordinating seems to be kind of the top one that people are finding the kind of really difficult. And then, yeah, prioritizing which issues to tackle first and implementing SEO fixes. And then, yeah, less around auditing, crawling the website, or reporting. Yeah, that's really, really cool. We don't have any other responses yet, so we can dive into kind of the process workflows and your strategies. So yeah, over to you guys.
Amazing. Cool. Yeah. So so on the workflow front, I'd say it's we've been talking about large scale e-commerce websites, and we know they are really, really complex. They have lots of the volume of pages is always way bigger than usual websites. And the way we approach it is that we always have constant monitoring in place. It's impossible to keep an eye on a website in terms of what is changing day to day if you do not have a structured crawl monitoring in place. If you do have that, which we do with Lumar, for our clients who are of this scale, then that makes it very easy for us to identify issues from that data. When you have, let's say, 20, 30 different reports in the platform based on the day-to-day crawl data, you can easily spot if there is any trend that's going in a different direction. That allows you to then take a closer look at the templates that it is happening on, and you can then analyze what exactly has changed. I think one example and a really interesting one is that a lot of times you might think that when things change, you will notice them through spot checks by just kind of looking at the website generally. But there, as I said before, there are so many layers of complexity. Things can change at so many levels that it's almost impossible for anyone who is spot checking their website to really understand what has changed. One example, it's a very subtle example from a change perspective, but from a risk perspective, it was a big one. We saw a client website where the metadata of the website pages, the key website pages, PDPs, PLPs, moved from the head section of the website to the body section of the website within HTML. Now, all the tools that we use to validate or understand that issue, they did not flag that as a problem because they are configured to just look for metadata, and if it's there, it's there. It's great. This is your meta title because it is part of your HTML. But with Lumar, we saw that we actually identified that through Lumar because Lumar understood that while the metadata was part of the HTML code, it wasn't part of the head section of the page where it should be actually. So as I said, like if there isn't a structured, intelligent reporting in place, it is easy for anyone to lose track of what's changing on the website and what they need to tackle that proactively. So there's always constant monitoring, issue identification at scale, and analysis and recommendations from those changes. It's also important for, especially for large scale websites, to crawl to segment their crawls, because if you have a website with, let's say, 25,000 products, 5,000 categories, that is 30,000 pages. If there are 179 URLs going in one direction, you end up reading 179 URLs and trying to guess what is changing. But if you have crawl segmentations in place, you know how the business value, the commercial value, or the technical complexity level changes from one subfolder to another, from one universe to another, from one business line to another. It's easy to make sense of the changes that you are seeing in that data. Again, from a business value and prioritization perspective, we use if effort versus reward modeling, and we contextualize the value of URLs based on the performance they have in Google Search Console. We have integration between Google Lumar and Google Search Console where we can see what is happening to the traffic of individual URLs that we're looking at, where any trends are changing. And we also have in place an integration to understand, it's a third-party integration to understand the volume of backlinks, and those metrics to individual URLs, and that does help understand the value of the pages that are affected with any issue, but then also allows us to prioritize the effort that we want to put behind those things. And ultimately, everything goes into a backlog where we usually manage our backlogs outside Lumar, but Lumar gives us enough structured information to then take away, build our stories or requirements for the cross-discipline teams to take up and start doing the development work. I'm not sure, Sim, if you'd like to add anything, because
Yeah.
it's pretty much the broadly the same kind of approach that we take for.
Yeah, completely. I think as well how we've been able to use the information from Lumar because, like how we've mentioned on ecom sites that are multinational, we found that typically it would be that if you have an issue, it's going to impact the same page template across all of the markets, or it might be that if it's affecting one market in one area, it's typically going to be affecting other markets in that same area. So what we've done for our client specifically is to produce a monthly tech report. So we're able to tackle those big issues. And then also we're able to look at like the error section of in Lumar to see are there any quick wins that we can also look at from a technical perspective. So it's about using that information that we have within the tool, trying to package it up in a way where you can understand the market differences from a technical perspective and where you can make quick wins as well. So that's how we're essentially finding SEO issues at scale.
Amazing. That's really great.
Cool.
Do you want to talk a bit about the kind of the going from manual to a bit more automated?
Yeah, definitely. So I think using a tool such as Lumar, what that's enabled us to do is just transform our ways of working. It used to be very manual and a lot of Excel. And we know when you use Excel and you have formulas and you use it for data collection, it only opens up the more chances for human error, which then are really hard to backtrack. So I think with Lumar, what we've been able to do is spend less time doing that manual data collection. We've been able to implement automated solutions. So we have weekly, bi-weekly crawls set up. And then that has led into all of these other workflow improvements. So we've been able to go from inefficient configurations to simplified processes at scale. So for all of our markets have been impacted by this workflow change. We've been able to tackle some of the more high maintenance SEO issues. Like I said, because we're able to spend more time analyzing. That means we've been able to connect with dev teams looking at global code changes. That's going to impact not just one market, all markets. And then, of course, time-consuming reporting. And this, I think, is probably a bugbear across lots of teams. We've been able to now dedicate time every single month to reporting, and we've nailed the process down because we have access to the data so easily now within Lumar or a tool like Lumar. Cool. So I'll lead into a bit about crawl segmentation and how to parse huge amounts of data, how to segment data. And the real issue at hand here is that you'll have a large number of pages by nature. When you're multinational, that's an added layer. So it can be really difficult to get a view of each site, what the issues are, where to place your efforts. And then one way that we have been able to tackle that is, like I said, we've been able to automate our crawls on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on the market size. And then also we've been able to segment. We've been able to have deeply customized segments working with the Lumar tech team. So we are able to segment that is putting our business focus first. So what is important to our client, we can segment based on that. So typically it would be your page type or template, your categories, and we're also being able to segment at URL level. And then what the key benefits from this is that we've been able to conduct analysis on page types across multiple markets. we were able to think about our business first, building very customized segments. So they're not just kind of blanket segments that aren't important to us. It means that we're using the credits in a really resourceful way. And then also we're able to isolate issues and work with teams to provide solutions. So those are the key things when you are looking at segments. And then if you go into the next slide, if you are completely new to segmentation, not sure where to start, we've put together a list of segments that you can take a look at later. This is probably like the core segments that you can build and the purpose of them. Cool. So one of the key areas where we've been able to really work with Lumar and building custom metrics is to do with keyword mapping. So alongside the technical team at Lumar, we've developed this custom metric. And what this custom metric does is it analyzes the Google Search Console data and it automates keyword mapping for us across all of the markets we work in. In an ideal world, you would have a market lead that can speak that language, but in reality, we just know that's not true. And also, you can also use things like translation agencies. However, that can take a lot of time. So this has been like a really great example of how we've been able to cut down time. So we're definitely more time efficient now. And also we're able to make localized optimizations, be it quick wins, extensive keyword mapping documents using this information from Lumar. So what it does is we're able to see at page level primary keywords in English and also in the translated language. And then what we can do with this information is that we combine the recommendation at page level with performance metrics. So we're always linking it back to how we've been able to improve rankings from the information we've got from Lumar. So we've spent no time translating anything. We've been able to get this directly from the tool, which has been a game changer in terms of the time that we're spending essentially. And it's been great for keyword mapping and also finding quick wins on keyword optimization. Another key issue that we had that I touched on earlier was where a business might be growing and very rapidly and they are building on new markets and maybe at pace. And typically you would then use one market's website as a template for another. But what that can do is cause some localization issues. And for example, one of the issues that we came across was where we had a mix of English content and the localized content on one page. So it was two languages on one page. Again, with Lumar, we partnered with Lumar. They were able to build a custom metric for us so we could analyze what content on the page is actually showing a mix of languages. And there we were able to localize from there and then improve the quality of the pages from that aspect. And really what that helps with in terms of performance is traffic and your conversion as well. So we saw some really great results on the back of this custom metric too.
Amazing. And then a couple of more bits from a process workflow perspective. One is that when you're working with websites that are evolving, where there are always technical releases happening, regression testing becomes really, really important. One might think that there are not many SEO-led releases for a website in any given month, but reality is that for large complex websites, there is always something happening. There are things changing to improve user experience, to improve site speed, to improve the structure, the layout, and the integrations and the functionality. So you want to make sure as SEO team that whenever something is changing on the website, as I said, again, could be related to SEO or not, you want to make sure that the things that you care about are intact and are not changed accidentally. So in the sprints, when you're working with any such client, it's always important to have a regression testing in place, have your UAT onboarded, have your staging onboarded, have the live website there, so that you can see what is going to be released. Once that is released, what has changed? Are the changes that you're seeing now are expected and in line with the scope of that release, or are there any unexpected changes that have taken place? What it does is it saves you a lot of headache and time, because if you only discover something has changed from a Google Search Console report, it's likely too late. It's already maybe a week that since that change has happened, and now you have to kind of react to that change and get that fixed. So when you plan things with the workflow, with the process, what you are doing is you are, instead of being reactive, you are being proactive. You are ensuring that the development is agile, and you always in the know of what is going to change, what has changed, and how that has impacted your performance positively. Then the last bit is really around resource optimization. So all in all, everything that we've discussed, or most of things that we've discussed today in this webinar, allow ultimately us to optimize a resource. And what I mean by that is that that when if you spend as an expert a lot of time manually gathering and stitching together data, which I think is sometimes can be fun activity. I like spreadsheets, I like data frames, I like data blending. So that's like a fun activity, but that's not the best use of my time. So what happens when you work with a partner like Lumar? You have all that information structured really in a really good way, so that you can jump into the platform and start extracting insights for your clients, rather than doing that busy work in the beginning, which I said I personally like, but I understand it's not the most productive part of my role. So that allows you to focus more on strategy and insight, rather than combining data and just creating a view that will enable you to drive insights. And yeah, so some key takeaways really from this whole conversation. Over to you, Sim, if you could please touch on some of them.
Yep. So some key takeaways. So from everything that we've spoken today, we've cut this down into 4 key takeaways that you can share with the rest of your team, or points of thought that you can take away. So one is about embracing complexity. Multinational sites are naturally complex, and that can be a real challenge. But think about getting access to your CMSs. It's about using your tool stack resourcefully. And that means you can break down complexities, you can prioritize, and then action. From the UX side, we do know that websites with great UX on the surface, they can be really complex on the back end. So that's why having access to your CMS or the setup in the back end is really, really important. So get in touch with those teams if not already. And then also thinking beyond visibility. So visibility will always be the key metric to think about. It's how we measure, it's how we talk every single day about SEO, but don't forget about localization, efficiency, scalability. They are so important for international SEO, and think about it in a way that these are going to aid performance. So these things are going to aid visibility. So you're not just thinking about metrics separately. All of these things together are going to increase visibility.
Amazing. And the third one is to adapt to shifting catalogs. Your inventory, as we discussed, is already is always evolving. So just make sure that there are strategies in place to address those changes, so that you are always able to maximize your performance and protect your performance where things are changing. And the last one is to monitor relentlessly, because things can go wrong at many levels between releases. And again, to reiterate, I'm not talking about SEO releases. Just any release that is changing the website can potentially harm your performance if things are changing in a direction that you're not expecting.
Awesome. These were great insights, really practical tips. Thank you so much. This leads us to a third poll question. Obviously, there was a part around how Lumar assisted with some of these processes and workflows. If anyone has been inspired and wants to learn more about Lumar and get a demo, please let us know. There will be, again, like a poll pop-up. Let us know if you'd like to see a demo of the Lumar platform. Yeah, the poll question should be for voting. Hopefully, most of the answers will be yes. Give everyone 10 minutes. Yeah, you can. In the meantime, you can also submit your questions in the Q&A widget. We will probably have time to answer 1 or 2 questions live. The rest we'll be able to answer offline as we're kind of we're a bit short on time. But yeah, all of the questions will be answered.
I think there's one in the chat about the out of stock.
Yes, it was about the out of stock management. Yeah, let's start with that one. Oh yeah, we can move on to the questions then. I don't know who wants to take this one. I think it was submitted while.
Yeah, I'm happy to take on that one. Yeah. So I think the question is how this works in case of back orders, pre-orders. I'd say for back orders, since the change is more operational behind the scenes than on the front end for clients, that there's definitely likely a change of how quickly the product will be delivered. So if a business delivers usually in, let's say, 3 days or next day delivery, and if it's a back order, there might be a delay in that delivery. It might not be the standard fastest delivery that the business offers. So it does make sense to adapt that scenario and change the messaging in the content to make sure that aligns with the realistic timelines of that scenario. So if it's a back order, let's assume it's going to be delivered in 4 weeks. So I think it makes sense to create a scenario, to create kind of a really, really mini proposition in the content that hints that this order is not going to be delivered next day because it's a back order. We don't need to explicitly say it's a back order, but just through messaging deliver that. And for pre-orders, we also have usually, I mean, for pre-orders, definitely it's like you have a page live. I think what kind of the action that can be taken really in both scenarios is this through the structured data and content. So in the structured data, we have attributes through which you can define the availability of the product. So you have attributes like pre-order, back order, in stock, etc. So it does make sense to provide the right kind of information in the structured data and on the front end to make sure that crawlers, when they're reading content, users, and the crawlers, when they are actually parsing structured data, are all understanding the availability scenario for any given product.
Awesome. Conscious of time, we will be answering the rest of the questions offline. I think we've got some further reading resources at the very end. So if you can quickly click forward into the last slide.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, as I mentioned, all the other questions that have been submitted will be answered offline. But yeah, if you want to dive deeper into any of the topics that we discussed and also learn about some of the other things that we've got going on at Lumar, but also what Brave Bison have going on, you can check out one of these resources, the Decoding Discovery podcast hosted by Brave Bison. Link on this can be found in this presentation. The new ebook that we've got here at Lumar around AI search, one of the hot topics these days. And then also don't forget to register to our next webinar, which is coming up on the 15th of October. around content and tech SEO in AI search. So yeah, some quick links for everyone to check out. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Z. Thank you, Sim. That was really insightful. And yeah, we hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.